Mornings on BBC Radio Scotland.
Before all that, it's the phone in. And what are you doing to save planet Earth? Well, two Swedish women are doing their bit. Maja Rosén and her neighbour Lotta Hammar have persuaded 10,000 people to sign a petition promising not to take a flight next year. They aim to get 100,000 people to boycott aviation in 2019 to highlight climate change and put pressure on politicians. To put this in perspective for you, Edinburgh, Scotland's busiest airport, had 13 million passengers last year, up 9% on the previous year. If global aviation was a country, it would rank in the top 10 worst pollution emitters. So what do we do about that? Would you give up flying for a year or longer to help save the planet? 08085 92 95 00. It's free to call BBC Radio Scotland, or you can text us 80295. The discussion is already underway on social media. Callum on Facebook. These last few years I've been trying to make the point of holidaying in Scotland and aiming to travel more locally. I figure avoiding flying must be the most impactful thing I can do in terms of trying to be aware of my carbon footprint. Andrew, though, only if the Royals, etc., give up using helicopters as transport. Duncan says noise pollution from aircraft's a huge issue. I live 20 miles away from an airport. I'm subjected to loud rumble from climbing planes. My windows shake as well. And Mo says, I haven't flown anywhere in the last 2 years, although mainly because I've spent so much time on delayed trains. I haven't had the time. That's a question. If we're not flying, how do we get places? Or do we have to live more locally with a view to saving the planet? What do you think? 08085 92 95 00. 80295 if you want to text us this morning. Let's go to where all this started, to Sweden this morning, and speak to Maja Rosén, co-founder of Flight Free 2019. Maja, morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Welcome to BBC Radio Scotland. What an interesting idea.
Thank you.
How did you come up with it?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about how to make people fly less because I gave up flying myself about 10 years ago. And ever since I've been struggling a bit when I've been talking to people about flights, because part of me hasn't wanted to destroy the atmosphere. But then I've been so worried about climate change. So this year I gave myself a New Year's resolution to start asking socially inconvenient questions. And after asking some people if they aren't worried about their climate change, I realized that it's actually possible to talk to people about climate change, and that so many hasn't realized how big of an impact flying has on climate change.
Well, you signed up 10,000 people already for this challenge, and you aim to get 100,000 to sign up before 2019. Yeah,
that's right, because we think a lot of people thinks that, there's no point in if I, as an individual, make these changes. But if we come together and decide that, okay, let's do something together, we can make a big difference. Because if 100,000 people here in Sweden sign, that will affect so many others in the Swedish population and also hopefully as well in other countries.
For those who don't understand, Maja, what is the impact that aviation has on the environment?
Well, here in Sweden, aviation stands for, on average, 10% of our individual emissions. But the thing is that those 10% is the number that we need to reduce our emissions to in total. So if you fly, you can say that you've already used up your carbon dioxide budget, and then you have nothing left for the things that you actually have to do, like living somewhere, eating food, and other things.
Here's the thing, though. If you reach your 100,000... Yesterday in Asia, 3 times that many people took a flight for the first time. This is a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
I think it's not. I mean, first of all, as you said, they took their flight for the first time. That means that we who live in Europe, we have already had such a much more big impact on the climate than those people have. And the reason that they now want to start flying is because they've been watching us, seeing that if you're successful and, then you eat a lot of meat, you travel, you consume. And I think now we have to be a good example and show, that it's possible to have a good life and make it like high status not to fly instead. Okay, so the world is full of individuals, and we have such a huge impact on each other because everyone wants to do what other people do.
We need to lead the way on this kind of thing. There's a message here from Gail, who's been in touch with the programme, Maja. She says, I understand what they're trying to do with this, but what if you need to travel for work? I'm in Edinburgh, I have to go to London. It's 3 days by horse, possibly sometimes the same amount of time by train. In practical terms, how can you lead an active life when the constraints around transport are such as they are? The investment in this country has not been there in the alternative forms of transport to allow us to make journeys, in some cases, apart from aviation.
I mean, it's a huge challenge, and I understand that for some people it may be very difficult. But I think what we need to do is we have to make demands on our employees. And I mean, I think there are so many journeys or traveling that could be avoided. I think a lot of meetings could be done via Skype, and I mean, it is also possible for many people to go by train. So even if not everyone can sign up for this campaign, I think it's a way to show an interest in traveling in a climate-friendly way. So, of course, we need to sort of rebuild the train system, and we need political instruments and everything. But this is a way to start. I think by doing this, we can show both each other and our political leaders that we're actually willing to make changes to save the climate. So, I think this is a start, and to change the norm.
You're on BBC Radio Scotland this morning. Have you been surprised by the impact that this has had? What's the reaction been, Maja?
I think we've had so many positive reactions because a lot of people, they are really worried and they feel like, a bit helpless that they can't do something. But this is a concrete way that you can get started and change your lifestyle, and also as it affects everyone around you, and we do it 100,000 people together, it actually makes a big difference. So I think reactions have been very positive. And what's interesting is that once people sort of decide to sign up, they look at this a different way, because before people maybe think, it's probably not so bad, but now you put on like new glasses and you actually see flying for what it is, and then everyone is like, oh my God, we can't keep doing this, and they want to try to make other people sign up, and they also become more willing to, or they understand that we have to make political demands as well. So it's a way to sort of wake people up and get more engaged in the climate issue.
What would you say, Maja, to someone who, listening to this programme, who, maybe their son or daughter has moved to Australia and grandchildren have been born and they're desperate to see the grandchildren. They want to go out and see their family, but they are wrestling with the environmental impact that will have, the carbon footprint that will leave behind. What would you say to them?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question, because I really understand that you want to see your family. But I also think, we're now talking about the survival of humanity, and that we have to the emissions globally have to start reducing within the next coming few years and be cut in half in a decade. So, I really think that you have to very carefully think about if you're willing, how much of a risk you're willing to take, and maybe instead of, if you want to see your family, maybe 5 people live in the UK and 1 in Australia, and then maybe the person in Australia should go to the UK instead of the 5 people from the UK going back. And, you have to really consider how you can make the impact as little as possible. And I also think that if you want to make a flight, then you have to think about cutting down your emissions in other ways, like, not eating any meat or dairy, not driving car, and, so I think we should have some kind of carbon dioxide quota or something.
For each person, you get to use a quota every year, and it's up to you maybe how you spend it, but at least it makes you think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Maja, thanks so much for your time this morning. Live from Sweden, that's Maja Rosén there, co-founder of Flight Free 2019. She's not flown in 10 years because of the impact it has on the environment, and she's urging others not to fly next year. 10,000 people already signed up.